So tonight, what I'm going to talk about is self-publishing a novel rather than traditionally publishing a novel, and why I decided on doing this. Well, actually, why choose self-publishing? What are the steps involved? How much time does it take? And how much does it cost? Which, of course, is going to be the bottom line, because it's more expensive, as I understand it, than traditionally publishing. And I say that only because I've never had anything traditionally published, so I'm not really sure what sort of output of money is involved there. So we'll back up just a step here. And I think one thing to ask yourself before you decide whether you want to self-publish or traditionally publish is, why do you want to publish to begin with? Do you want to do it for the fame? Do you want to do it for the prestige? Do you want to do it for the money? And here I say, don't make this a big consideration. And that applies to both self-publishing and traditional publishing. Most books do not have a huge return on investment. I think for every book sold, either a self-published novel or a traditionally published novel, the author will get somewhere between $2 to $3. So unless you're selling literally millions of books or even hundreds of thousands of books, there's not a lot of money coming back in. And the other option, of course, is that you decide to publish because you want to say something that you want to reach people with. And so publishing options, if you publish traditionally, you're more likely to hit the fame and prestige buttons than you would if you self-publish. And that's because when you publish traditionally, your books will appear in Barnes and Noble. They could be, as I'll explain later, they could be reviewed by the New York Times, the New Yorker. Whereas when you self-publish, you're much more limited in the exposure that your book gets. So one thing to keep in mind when you self-publish is that as a writer, you're concerned with expressing yourself. A publisher, meaning not a self-publisher, so a traditional publisher, is concerned primarily with selling your book, and these two interests may not align. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I'm not downplaying the importance of traditional publishing, but one interesting point is that of all the books that are published in this country this year and last year, around 60% are actually self-published and 40% are traditionally published. So there's a lot out there. And it becomes a growing industry for a variety of reasons. COVID had a lot to do with it. People had more time to themselves and decide to write as a way of, reaching out and communicating with others. So a lot more books are being written now, and because of that, there's a limited number of publishers, and they're going to take a limited number of books. So self-publishing is becoming a bigger option for people. Okay, traditional publishing, usually you will follow these steps. The first step is to find a literary agent. This is easy, as there are literally thousands out there. And all you need to do is to Google literary agent, and you will get different sites that list thousands of agents, and you can then decide what sort of book you're writing. Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? If it's nonfiction, you have all these various categories. If it's fiction, is it what they call literary fiction? Is it popular fiction? Is it a young teen novel, and that sort of thing. And each category has a specified number of agents that deal only with that. And then what you do is you contact the agents, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult, because the percentage of books that most agents will accept is around 5% and probably closer to 1%. When I started trying traditional publishing with the book I self-published before this one, I sent out letters to 167 agents. I got back responses from about 20. One was not a no. She asked me for the first 50 pages of the book, and I sent them to her, and then she decided, no, not going to work. So, you know, it's fine. Because I don't know what they're looking for. I only know what I've written and what I've expressed. And as I said, it might be two completely different things. They might think, well, this is really good. I just don't see a big market for it. They never say that, but you like to think that's really what they're thinking if they say no. If they say yes, the agent then has to find a publisher. And the number of publishers has decreased markedly over the past several decades. There used to be probably close to 200 publishers. There are now, I don't know how many, but I'm going to say there are probably less than 50 and maybe closer to 30 or 40 publishers. There are small publishing companies, but they might be even harder to get into because they're very small and there's very little person power there to get things done. One publisher decides to accept it. Ideally, the book is published and the book is then released to the public. Now, the advantages and disadvantages to traditional publishing. One of the advantages is that you're open to famous awards. The Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, which are the two big fiction awards, are not given to self-published novels. So if you're hoping to get your hat in the proverbial ring, you have to have your book traditionally published. Your book will appear in chain stores, and it may be reviewed in prestigious publications. You also have to do relatively little because once a publisher accepts it, it becomes the property of the publisher. And it's a double-edged sword because you have to do very little, but you also have, as we have in the disadvantages, very little control over what actually happens to the book. There's also minimal cost. One big disadvantage to getting a book traditionally published is the amount of time it takes. And right now they estimate between the time you find an agent and the time your book appears on the shelf of a bookstore, they estimate 3 years, but with things getting a little bit tighter in publishing, it's not uncommon to think you might have to wait closer to 4 years before you actually see a book in somebody's hand. Lack of control. What this involves is there will be people, lots of people, from what I'm told, I haven't experienced this myself, but from what I'm told, there will be lots of people in the publishing house who will be reading your book for their own particular reasons, and each one has a specific reason that they're reading it. So a lot of the writing of the book might change fairly markedly. Your book might be cut down a lot. The tone of the book might change. The style of the writing might change. Names of your characters might change. The title of your book might change. The trajectory of your story might change. So by the time your book, quote unquote, is actually released to the public, it might not look a whole lot like what you had in mind. Now, this is not to say that all of this is done behind your back. I mean, it's my understanding that you are involved, but it's also my understanding that they basically have the final word because they're going to be paying you for it. I do not know how much they pay for releasing a novel. It's, I think, a fairly decent amount, but I don't know offhand, so I don't want to give any numbers. The other interesting thing, and this is a fairly recent development, is that publishers used to publicize books that they're putting out, which makes complete sense. These days, a lot of that is actually left to you, the author, to basically hire your own publicist. It's something that not every publisher is doing anymore. So it's kind of in a way not an ideal situation because you're forfeiting a lot of control up front, but they're not doing everything for you either, which is, after thinking about it, I didn't even bother to look for an agent with this book. I just decided, you know, I had a very positive experience with self-publishing the time before this one. So I think, you know, I figured, let me just do it again. Okay, self-publishing advantages and disadvantages. It was about 2 months between the time I dotted my last I and crossed my last T on my manuscript and the time the book was in my hands, which was pretty overwhelming. When you actually see it in real life, it's just an amazing feeling. It's like, I suppose it's like having a child, you know, it's like, it's suddenly real. What you've been thinking about suddenly becomes something real that you can, you know, hold in your hands and, you know, perceive with all 5 senses. And as I said, you also have complete control. You decide on every aspect of what the novel will say. You also have complete control on how it will look. When you go through traditional publishing, they will decide what chapter breaks look like. They will decide how big the margins are going to be. They will decide on the type size. They will decide on the typeface. You might really think it looks ugly, but they will more than likely find a reason to convince you that, you know, we've been doing this for hundreds of years. It's better. You know, and after a while, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, after a while, it's like, it might be better, but it's no longer mine, so I don't know how much better it really is. Disadvantages to self-publishing: less prestige, but you are open to different awards. My book has currently been sent to 3 national competitions that deal only with self-published novels. And it can appear in private stores as well. You can send the book, you or your publicist can send a copy of the book to a local bookstore and see if they would like to stock it. And my publicist sent the copy of my book to this very library, and it's now on the shelf downstairs. And it was not something I honestly would have thought about doing. I have to apologize to the library people, but it wouldn't have occurred to me that they would actually do that. It might not be reviewed in prestigious publications, but it can and likely will appear on social media. So my book was discussed on YouTube. There's a reviewer in California who hasn't actually reviewed the novel yet, but he was sent a copy and he did discuss it on his broadcast, and that got a lot of reviews. It's also shown up on Instagram. And now if I type in my name and the title of the book, The Judges, in Google, you get a lot of things. So social media is now picking up on a lot of books. And I am thinking they're probably focusing at least as much on self-published novels as on traditionally published novels. It also can get expensive, as I will get into at the end, with how much it actually costs to self-publish a book. Okay, how to get your book self-published. These are the actual steps that I went through. There's a site called Readsy. There are other sites. I am only familiar with Readsy. I'm not familiar with the other sites, so I won't mention them. I haven't actually looked at them. But when you go to Readsy, what you can do is you can find an editor and or proofreader to read your book, do what editors and proofreaders do. You can find a designer, you can find a publicist, and if you choose, you can find a ghostwriter. If you're thinking, yeah, you know, I have an idea for a book, but I'm not sure how to put it together. So you can get it ghostwritten. Each person on Readsy has a portfolio or a description and gets reviewed. When it came to choosing a designer, what I looked for was a designer who put out a lot of books that looked really different. They didn't all look like they were designed by the same person. And when I looked for a publicist, I went to see what the publicist said about him or herself and what sort of reviews they got. The designer that I had for this book, I did not find on Readsy. And in fact, the designer I got for this book, who I think did an absolutely brilliant job, was a friend of my publicist. So, you know, it's kind of networking. And then you can choose who you like, but my recommendation is to not choose one person. You could choose a favorite, but send out queries to maybe 3 or 4 different people and ask them how much they cost, because they don't always, in fact, they don't, from what I remember, they don't usually tell you what the price is going to be. And prices can vary really, really widely. After that, you would find a printer. The printer I use is called Ingram Spark. They're based in Tennessee, and they're really, really, really excellent. They're very inexpensive. They were very helpful. Whenever I wrote them an email, I would say it never took more than 2 hours for them to write back to me. And it was very easy to upload the book and the cover to their website, which is important because sometimes doing something seemingly simple like uploading a book is not simple. So it's great that they were there.
Did you get the printer off Readsy?
That's a good question. I don't remember where I found Ingram Spark. I might have found them on Readsy, but I am not sure. I probably did, but I'm not 100% sure. If I didn't, then I just, you know, Googled printer self-published novel, and there's just, you know, a lot out there. So the first step would be the editing, proofreading. And the options that you have would be to edit and or proofread the book yourself. I'm an editor by trade, so I chose to edit and proofread the book by myself. One step up would be to ask for what they call a line edit, which is basically correcting and and giving you advice on grammar, spelling, and punctuation only. So basically your story stays exactly as you wrote it, but if there are issues with spelling or grammar, or if there are other words that the editor thinks might sound a little bit more like what the rest of the book sounds like. So they're going to, look at what you've done in toto. It's not a question of, well, this is what's going to sell. It's like it's a little bit more personalized. So you can get an editor to do that. Or the big step is to ask an editor for an in-depth edit, which allows them to do extensive rewrites, delete passages or pages and pages and pages that they think are slowing down the story. But again, they're working for you, and you have really complete control over all that. So it's that little bit more personalized than it would be with a big publishing house. Designing. You have a couple of options when it comes to designing. You can design the book yourself. You can ask a designer to design only the front and back cover and the spine, of course. You design the interior. On the other hand, you could ask the designer only to design the interior, you design the front and back cover. Or you could do what I did, and that is to ask the designer to design the front and back cover and the interior, which I think is usually what people do, because most people either aren't, artists, or aren't very familiar with typography. And so from what I've seen, the difference in cost is not huge to have a designer do everything for you. Okay, after speaking with your designer, the designer that I used for this book, what he did was he asked me for a copy of the completed novel, which I had as a Word document. I sent it to him, he read it, and then he sent back 3 cover designs based on what he thought captured. 2 designs captured the mood of the book, and 1 design, which was the design I chose, captured what I thought was the climactic moment in the book. And I didn't tell him this is the climactic moment. He picked it up all by himself, which was really impressive. So obviously, these people know exactly what to look for to give you a cover that's really going to show people what the book is about. Because yes, we all do judge books by their covers. Even though we've been told since childhood not to, that's okay. He then sent me 3 different typefaces that looked really very, very, very different from each other. And each one had a very particular feel. And I looked at one and I thought, this looks okay. I looked at another one and I thought, this one is a little bit harder to read. And then I looked at the one that we chose, and I had never seen this font before. And I said, well, this is a gorgeous font. Let's go with that. And then we worked on, how many lines were going to fit on each page. You could do very tight pages. You can do very loose pages, how big the text was going to be. And then the designer will send you multiple proof. When you make all these decisions, you submit to him or her the book, and then they will send you proofs. And what you want to do there is first make sure that nothing was deleted inadvertently, that your book reads exactly as you submitted it from first word to last word. It's always possible that a line is going to be missing because of a page break, and they're manipulating, how long the page is going to be. So that's always a very important thing to do. Some page breaks won't look good. You can talk to them about that. You want to make sure that there are no typos you missed when you submitted the book. And I shouldn't say this, but yes, I'm an editor, and yes, there were typos that I missed when I submitted the book. And then if you want to make changes in the book, because now you're seeing what it's going to really look like, and you think, you know, now that I'm looking at the way it's really going to appear as a printed copy, I'd like to make this change. And it's funny how when you're reading it on the screen as a Word document, and when you're reading it, it's also going to be on a screen, but when you're reading it as a picture of an actual page, it just looks and feels very different than it does when you're, you know, reading it as a raw manuscript. One essential point: you need to buy an ISBN. Every published book must have an ISBN. Different forms of the same book require different ISBNs. So I had to buy 3. I had to buy one for my hardcover, one for my paperback, and one for my ebook. They're very, very, very easy to obtain. You basically write to this ISBN office, and they don't need to see anything. Just give them the title of your book, give them your name, and virtually within 10 seconds, they will send you back ISBNs. So what you're going to do then is send that information to your printer, and your printer will then come up with, you know, the necessary page at the beginning, gives the name of the publishing house. I'll get into that in just a second. Gives the ISBN number, gives the date of publication, and says, you know, all these characters are fictional. Any resemblance to living people is purely coincidental. I mean, every writer knows it's not pure coincidence, but they have to put it there just to keep everybody safe. When it comes to choosing a name for a publisher, it's ultimately better if you don't say published by and then put in your name. It just looks more professional to come up with a name. All you need to do is come up with a name. You don't have to open up anything in an actual business-like way. Just come up with a name, and also make sure that name hasn't been used by another publishing house. And the name I came up with, since we live in New Jersey, was Next Exit Press. It just seemed to fit. So
you can't just use Scribner.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's been taken already. It's
So it doesn't need to be a legal entity of any kind.
exactly right. Which is good, because legal entities become just a lot of little stuff has to be done constantly, and it's not fun. Sure.
Is that when you might find out that, oh, there's already a book existing with this title or something like that?
As far as I know, you cannot copyright the title of a piece of literature. So you can actually have a book published with the same name as another book.
Like, I'm sure there are many books titled The Judges.
Right.
Don't title your novel Tale of Two Cities. Right.
Exactly. Yes. Although you might get, a lot of sales, and then, it's like, oh, wait a minute. A lot of returns too. Yes, exactly. So then we get to the subject of publicity, and you can do 2 things. You can publicize the book yourself, or you can hire a publicist to publicize the book for you. Publicize the book yourself. You can go on Facebook, you can go on Instagram, you can go on YouTube, and what they're now referring to as BookTube. This is a term that's new to me. It might have been around for years, I don't know. It's basically YouTubers who do nothing but talk about novels that they've read. And what I did, out of sheer laziness, but also because, so I guess it wasn't sheer, also because I didn't think publicity was my strong point. I don't think of myself as a salesperson at all. So I chose to, go with a publicist and see what he or she could tell me. When you get a book publicized, you enter into a long-term process. And by long-term, I mean the book, the judges, I hired my publicist, his name was David, for 8 months. And the 8 months started right around the time I finished writing the book. And I sent him a copy. And what he did then was to start alerting a ton of media outlets, because a lot of these outlets need to know months and months in advance before the publication date, so that they can decide, okay, yes, I will, or okay, no, I won't. But maybe I could find somebody who could post information about it. Maybe I could find somebody who will write a review of it. So it's really good to plan ahead with that. When I called David in May, which is when I had finished my book, this is May of last year, he said, let's publish it in January of this year. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to wait that long. But it's not really waiting that long, because you can get it printed anytime you want. You can start distributing it anytime you want. It's just a matter of when it's going to show up on Amazon and when it's going to be available to be seen by the public at large. So the first thing that the publicist will do is read the book and create a press release. And now here's an important point. If the publicist reads the book and decides he or she doesn't feel simpatico with the book, he or she, provided they're good at what they do, will say, I think I'm going to take a pass on this, because they really have to enjoy it in order to sell it. I mean, everybody knows there's a huge difference between selling something you really believe in and selling something just going through the motions because somebody told you, here, sell it. So I was very fortunate that my publicist liked both this book and the book that I had sent him 3 years earlier. Then he or she will produce a press release, go through, send it to you. You and the publicist will go over it, fine tune it. And then the press release goes out to newspapers, magazines, people on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, goes out to bookstores, goes out to libraries, goes out to more places than you realize exist. And they have contacts. They just basically know who wants to find out about what you've done. One kind of obvious place that he contacted was my college they send out a newsletter every quarter, and I get it, and as soon as I see it, I just toss it, and I've never opened it. It's like, college was decades ago. It's like, no, please, something else. And it never occurred to me that they might actually be interested in writing a review or talking about the fact that, yes, one of their prestigious alumni, wrote a book. So yes, publicists have a lot of contacts. So that's another really important reason to look for one. Then comes printing. The two printers I know of are Ingram Spark, which is located just outside of Nashville, and Troy Booksellers, which, as their name implies, is located in Syracuse. Just kidding. Is located in Troy, New York. And I'm sure there are others, but these seem to be the really big, prestigious ones, and they're very popular, and they seem to do a lot of really good work. what you do is you get printable copies of the front and back cover, the spine, and the entire inside from your printer and your I'm sorry, not from your printer, from your designer. And what your designer does is indicates everything where all the cuts are going to be. You decide how big you want the book to be. The designer will know how big to make the spine based on how many pages. You will also talk to the printer on how heavy you want the paper and what sort of paper and what color paper you want. And then you will upload the files to the printer. That was extraordinarily easy. It's just basically, click and move it and it's there. And the printer will then print your book, ship you as many copies as you like, and upload it to Amazon whenever you want them to. So what I did was, when I got the final copies back from my designer, I sent them to the printer back last May, but I told them that this is not going to be available on Amazon until the publication date, which is going to be on in January of this year. What you then do, the printer said, is it all right if we release copies prior to the publication date? And you say yes or no. And I, of course, said yes. So I was able to buy, I think I bought like 30 copies, which I gave out to, people I work with, friends, family. And then, saved, put it aside for letting other people who I'm a little bit less close to, buy it on Amazon, because of, let's be honest, the prestige. It's nice when you open up Amazon and, or rather open up your printer's website, and they will tell you how many copies have been sold. And I'll get to that in just a second. So time, how long does it take? Editing an average novel runs about 80,000 words. Mine is a little on the short side. It was like 71,000 words. Editing, you have to give an editor about a month, but it's not going to take a month for the editor to read through it. It's going to be a month of making suggestions, running them past you, and then you run them past the editor, and back and forth and back and forth. And that, of course, depends entirely on how quickly you do it, as much as how quickly the editor is doing it. Designing, give yourself up to a month. I think we actually got the design settled in maybe 2 weeks, because I was just so thrilled with what my designer sent me. If you don't like what the designer said, and this of course varies from one person to the next, but if you don't like what the designer sends you, they will probably give you other options. If you really dislike everything that they've done, they will design something else, because their name is going in on it. It will say in the book, designed by. And so, they want something that they're proud of as much as you do. Printing at Ingram Spark was extraordinarily fast. They say, due to an abundance of work, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks. And then they basically sent me the books in like 2.5 weeks. And then Publicity, as I had said, give yourself about 8 months, and it's best to contact a publicist up to 6 months before or even more before the book is released. But again, you can get it printed and distributed as quickly as you like. Now, cost. Okay. Editing, proofreading for an average novel, it averages between $1,000 and $3,000. My cost was $0 because I did the editing and proofreading. Designing, this is very, very variable. The lowest cost I found was $500. The highest cost I found was $6,000. My cost was $1,000. I thought, okay, don't tell anybody this. I thought it was worth a lot more than $1,000 given what he did. $6,000 seems to me extraordinarily expensive. I think 1,000 is probably pretty average. Maybe a little bit more, but 6,000 is at the very high end. And I only saw one designer who had a very elaborate website of all the books that they had designed. And it was basically a flat rate. It's like, you know, we don't care how big your book is, just give it to us and we'll charge you $6,000. And I'm like, I think not. Printing was also remarkably inexpensive. It was $50 to upload the book as a book, a hardcover, a paperback, and an ebook, all together was $50, and I paid $10 per printed copy, so I got 30 copies for $300, which was really, really, really inexpensive. Publicity, like designing, varies wildly. The least expensive price I saw quoted was $300. The most expensive price I saw quoted was $5,000 per month. If you're doing this for 8 months and you're paying your publicist $5,000 a month, excuse me, you're paying your publicist $40,000, which is a lot of money, which chances are you will not recoup in sales. You would basically have to sell maybe 12,000 copies of your book. And most books, you're lucky if you sell between 1 and 200 copies. So that's something to take into account. But my publicist was very, very, very straightforward. We discussed the price and we settled on $1,000 per month. I don't know what you can get for $300 per month, just because of the sheer amount of time that it takes to get something, you know, publicized. So you want to go over exactly what they're going to do for the cost, and they will, they might tell you, okay, well, if you pay me this much, I'll do that. If you pay me this much, I'll do that. If you pay me this much, I'll do that. We didn't do that. We just, you know, kind of, I told him basically what I wanted. And he gave me a price and it sounded completely reasonable. So we settled on that. The ISBN, you could do one of two things. You could buy one ISBN or you could buy 10 ISBNs. The price is $125 for one, $295 for 10. I needed 3, which would have come to $375. So I got 10. But here's the thing. I am not sure, but I think that these numbers, the 10 numbers they gave me, are now attached to something called the judges. I think I might be able to use one of those ISBN numbers if I write another book, but I'm not 100% certain. So please don't quote me on that. If, and this is the number that really blew my mind, if you decide you want to get a book ghostwritten, my first suggestion, play the lottery, because your average novel is going to cost probably around $250,000 to get ghostwritten. They charge by the word, and an average novel running 80,000 words, most ghostwriters, from what I understand, are closer to $3 than to $1. So you're looking at $240,000 to get a book written. If you decide you do want to get a book ghostwritten, my serious suggestion would be write something, no matter how unprofessional you think it sounds, hire an editor, let them rework it for you. It's going to be a lot less expensive. And I think there are going to be a lot of editors who are going to charge an absolute fraction of the price, who will really think, oh, wow, I get to rewrite something, because most people, for obvious reasons, don't want editors to do that. So if you're going to go the ghostwriting route, that's what I would do. I would say go with a good editor. And that's my entire presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
When you talked about release date.
Yes.
I got a little confused. You said like, you tell the printer, oh, we're gonna release it, say in January.
Mhm.
But before that, you can still give it to local
Okay.
places.
What the release date means is, it's really sad to have to say this, but the release date means is the day it appears on Amazon, and that your printer will automatically upload the book to Amazon. You decide on the price, but you have to charge a lot to get very little in return. I think my book is on Amazon for like $22.95, and I get maybe $3 after all is said and done for everything that they sell for $22.95. So the release date also is just, it means this is the day that the book appears in the public domain. So you can have copies of the book, and you can distribute these copies literally anywhere you want, except you can't distribute them in a library, you can't distribute them in a bookstore. You have to distribute them just, personally to friends, family, co-workers.
They're technically not for money, is what you're saying, like you can give them out.
You can give them out. You can sell them if it's a private thing. So I could, for instance, I could say to a neighbor, I just wrote this book, would you like a copy? I can sell it to you for $15. And they'll say, sure. Or you could say, I'm giving you a copy of my book, and the neighbor will say, can I pay you for it? And absolutely, there's nothing, legally stopping you from doing that. So really, the only thing that the release date does is it's the date when it technically becomes, a living, breathing entity out there.
Would it also be important for contests and prizes to say like,
yes,
the 2023?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One of the contests I entered said, we cannot accept books that haven't yet been uploaded to Amazon. Okay, it is what it is, and I'm not going to badmouth Amazon. And books that were published in, and then they will give you the year of publication. So the release date has to be, the release date and the year of publication are going to match. So my release date was January. It was originally January 10th, and then it became January 17th because of a little glitch that just something stupid I did, go figure. And but it was 2023, and so it said copyright 2023.
Did you consider Amazon at all to self-publish through?
I did not. I didn't really look into it. I had heard vague rumblings about it. And by the time that became an option, I'd already self-published an earlier book 3 years ago. And I don't know if Amazon was doing it back then. They probably were. But for those reasons, I did not consider it.
I also wanted to say, when you said, gifting copies at the library or anything, definitely there are some libraries that are looking specifically for local author books, because I had worked at the library in Paterson, New Jersey, and they wanted to make specific thing showcasing, local authors and local poets and everything, and so, anyone that, not, I don't want to say like anyone who like brought a book would come in, but like, we went out and sought local authors to add to the collection. So a lot of libraries will want that.
Interesting. This is good to know.
How many of those copies of that book have you sold?
Ah, good question. So this has been out now for about 6 weeks. And according to Ingram Spark, I've now sold 77 copies throughout the world. I've sold copies in the United States, England, France, Germany, Poland, and Australia. And I don't know how people in Europe are finding out about it. But again, it's like social media and people are like looking at something here and letting somebody there know about it. And so it's a lot of it is word of mouth.
Are most of those print or the ebook?
Those have all been print.
Oh,
How much, so it's available when you go to Amazon, you got
Right.
the options, hardcover, softcover, ebook.
You actually make that decision through your printer. They will ask you how much you want to sell it for. And what you then do is you will put in an amount and they will automatically calculate the amount and tell you how much it's going to make given what price you're charging. So for instance, I charged $22.95 for the hardcover, although for some reason Amazon was selling for $28.95. I don't know why, but that's what they were selling it for. And then they told me what I would make would be $3.17 or something. If I were to charge more though, so say I wanted to get $4 on a book, then I would have to be charging like maybe $35 a copy. And one good thing to do is to go onto Amazon and just go through hardcovers and see what they're being sold for. I mean, like traditionally published hardcovers, see what they're being sold for, and try to stay within that range. As somebody's going to say, oh my God, this book is too expensive, and they might be completely right. So you want to find something that's in a reasonable, quote unquote, reasonable price range.
So how much did this book cost you?
To upload it was just $10 a copy.
No, what did the entire process cost?
The entire process. Let me.
Goes back to that page.
Yes, it cost me. I'm going to say it cost about $10,000 altogether.
And so far you've sold 70,000.
77.
Makes more sense to be a ghostwriter, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The ebook is only a couple of dollars, right?
The ebook is very
Do you
inexpensive.
make any
Yes.
money? I'm in a book club, of course, most of the other ladies buy their books, they've got their Kindles and their Nooks. I like, this is me, I like the book, but the ebooks are very inexpensive, so.
I think I'm not making this up. I think I make 7 cents per
Okay.
ebook sale.
If I want to purchase a book from you
Yes.
and not through Amazon,
Right.
how would I just do that?
You just asked me. I have a box of them right there.
Unfortunately, you take debit cards. I'm sure you don't.
No, no,
Well,
no,
that's
it's,
cash
it's,
in
it's,
hand.
it's,
But so see, that's awkward, isn't it? Who has cash? But I would like to purchase. I would like to purchase.
oh,
It
sure,
looks
sure.
good. So are you gonna have another class?
I'm
I don't
actually
think I have enough money.
going to be
Sadly.
speaking, or I can give you, like my address if you want to send a check.
Okay.
That would
How
be
about
that'd be
that?
perfect. Yeah.
It's like when you go to a concert, it's always better to buy the merchandise from at the.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I could even autograph it for you free of charge.
Well, that would be very good. Thank you.